Hello there, hello there, hello there, YouTubes. How the devil are we all? I'm very well, thank you for asking. Now, the topic of this one is going to be the attacks, or the attack, I should say, that happened in Westminster, in London, on Wednesday, which was the exact date of that for posterity. Wednesday, the 22nd of March, 2017. I'm going to try to keep as calm a head as possible on this one. Although, do forgive me if I don't, because this has affected me in a way that I didn't think it would, really. Because this goes beyond just attacks on people, of course, and it's an attack on Parliament, which has been said by the people, but that means it's an attack on like the fabric of this society in which I live, or whatever, the country. In terms of like the attack on the rule of law, on popular government. And when I say I don't mean governments that are popular. I mean, governing by popular consent through election, a mandate, and all the rest of it. Which is obviously those are hugely important things. So it goes beyond just, it goes beyond solely attacks on people. For those who don't know, I'll just briefly explain. On Wednesday, a fucking piece of scum called Khalid Masood, although we'll get onto that in a moment as well, drove a hired utility vehicle down the western pavement, or I believe as it's called in America, sidewalk of Westminster Bridge in London, mowing down dozens, injuring, I think it was about 40, and killing 3. Well, at the moment, it's those are the numbers, but that could change because there are still people seriously injured in hospital, which is, I suppose, to be expected. But let's hope those people are okay, make full recoveries. Yeah, including, of course, one of the woman that was physically flung by the impact into the river. Although thankfully she was quickly rescued, and as far as we're aware, is still alive. Although clearly will have been significantly injured by what happened. That portion of the attack ended when he crashed into the barriers, the metal gate or fence, whatever, out the side of Parliament, right by Big Ben. Or the clock tower. Anyway, Big Ben's technically the bell, but let's not get into that. He then ran around the corner and stabbed a police officer who unfortunately would die at the scene, before taking a few more steps into the grounds of Parliament. There's like a little garden type bit, where once I actually had a cigarette in that garden many moons ago. Maybe that's a story for another day. That was an interesting experience. Anyway, the terrorist then was shot dead by armed officers, and the country's better off without him. And so that's what happened. An appalling crime, despicable. Although, as I said with his name, he wasn't born Khalid Masood. He was. I can't remember his. I tried to write like a script for this, and I just got too angry. But he had some fucking boring ass English name anyway. And it seems he was radicalized in prison, which adds a new layer of fuckery to the whole business, because obviously there is a problem with extremism in a certain part of the Muslim community, and they need to deal with that. And that's really something only they can deal with, in a sense, because as outsiders, it's difficult to really have a predetermined impact on a community. Like, we can have an impact on them, but it's depending on what we do. It's not necessarily, we don't necessarily know what the impact of that's going to be on how the community acts. Like, you can try and do something and it might be too much and they react against it, or it might be underperform. You know what I mean? It's difficult to know. So that's something they have to really focus on. But in terms of prisons, that brings up an issue which the sort of non-Muslim community can have an impact on, because whilst I don't for a second think that we should rights of religious expression for prisoners, there are clearly going to be ways. It's not beyond the wit of man, the ingenuity of societies to come up with ways of tackling. Surely that's something we can have, because we've got them literally as a captive audience, literally captive, like they're fucking held there against their will. So surely we can do something about that, it would seem. But whatever. And this leads into one of the thrusts of what I wanted to say about the consequences of this terrorist action. I had several people during the actual, as the story was sort of developing, like the main story itself had already happened, but as far as we were aware, it was still like an ongoing incident and we didn't know any of the details. I had several people contacting me going on about immigration. We need to stop immigration. This is what you get with immigration, blah, 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 blah. And this is why I know you guys are bigoted, reactionary scum. Because Khalid Massoud was not an immigrant. He was born in Britain, actually in Kent. Although, of course, he did. His last known whereabouts in terms of where he was living was in my own home city of Birmingham, because, of course, it fucking was. Yeah, so he wasn't an immigrant. So the fact that you decided to just knee-jerk go on about immigration tells me a little bit more about you than it does about immigration. And fuck you. And this is the thing. People like that like to go on about, oh, you can't talk about immigration without being called a racist. No, you can. You absolutely can talk about immigration without being called a racist. But the problem is, all you ever do is talk about immigration, and you are a racist. And you reveal that by the fact that as soon as this came up, without knowing any of the facts, you instantly reacted in that way. The reason I'm doing this several days later is because although I wanted to get on my camera and scream and shout and be that angry, reactionary prick, because human instinct to want to react and be angry about things, we didn't know any of the facts. We didn't know anything about what had happened. So to react at that point is fucking base. It's fucking animalistic bullshit. Grow up. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, there are a number of those sorts of elements to this where those sorts of people give the terrorists their victory. Because the terrorist victory does not come in the mowing down of human beings or the stabbing of police officers or flying planes into buildings. That's the means to the end. The end is to terrify. The end is to get people to the position where they hate on Muslims. They ostracize Muslims so that I can then, the narrative that these fucking evil terrorist pricks push on the world, that the West hates Muslims, the West hates Muslims, you're never going to be accepted by them, they despise you, it's a clash of cultures. And people can then believe that because you've ostracized them. You've done precisely what the terrorists want you to do. They want you to be scared. They want you to be fearful. They want you to hate on Muslims. Even though you know from your own lives that most Muslims are not going around committing fucking terrorist acts. We know that because they happen very rarely. There are a few that get stopped by the authorities, sure. But even if those went ahead, it would still be very rare compared to a place that I'm going to mention in a moment again, Iraq. I'll get back to that in a second. But in places like Iraq, Syria, Pakistan, wherever, these kind of terrorist attacks happen on an almost fucking daily, but in some cases, actually a daily basis. So that certainly Muslims who live in peaceful societies, in fact, anyone who lives in a peaceful society, by and large, they're not going to be dragged into terrorist actions. Whereas people who live in horrendous places tend to do horrendous things, it seems. And it's not a matter of of religion necessarily. I think if religion was removed from these scenarios completely, like if no one was religious, I think the world would be a better place for that. But it's not a matter of saying this religion is better than that religion. I think religion itself is the toxic element. The degree to which is minimal. The degree of difference between those is pretty minimal. Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, for those who don't know, I've done videos on him before, is a right-wing sort of, I think Dick Coughlin once described him as the fascist Elmo, because he's very small. And that's basically about right. He was in London on the day and immediately rushed to Westminster and immediately started ranting about Muslims this, Muslims that, even though he knew nothing about the situation. Reactionary fucking shite as usual. And of course, everyone, all of the usual skeptics were like, "Oh, that's fine. Let's ignore that. Let's ignore all of that." Giving it the Muslim immigration and banning mosques and all that shite. And one of his acolytes, Milo Yiannopoulos, who seemingly has learned nothing from his recent tribulations, posted, and there's this fucking meme. God almighty. You may have seen it, but it's pretty simple. I don't need to really show you so much because you can just explain it. It was a picture taken on Westminster Bridge, and you see these people sort of crouched over an injured, possibly even dying person who was a victim of the attacks, right? And you see that's sort of in the background. In the foreground, although they're sort of next to each other, it's quite a close shot, is a Muslim girl in like the headdress, not the full, the kind of head scarfy type thing, looking at her phone as if she's not going to care in the world. And Milo Yiannopoulos tweeted this thing out, and it had a bit of text on it saying like, "Oh, typical Muslims, they don't give a fuck." But as usual with Milo and his crew, his ilk of fucking filth, it was bollocks. It was total bollocks. It was totally taken out of any context, because what that woman was doing was, I mean, because she had been there at the time, like she could very well have been a part of the casualties list. She was searching through her phone to find the phone number of her parents to ring them and tell them she was still alive, because that was still like an active, ongoing terrorist sort of thing at the time. She had been helping with injured people, and after she'd made that phone call, she went back to helping people. But she took a small moment out of an incredibly stressful moment, of one of the most stressful moments of her fucking life, to inform her parents of her continued existence on this planet. That was what was taking place there. But no, they spun it as she's a Muslim, she doesn't give a fuck about what happened, even though she didn't know that a Muslim had done this. No one knew. No one. I mean, it had the kind of MO of modern, you know, the thing where they're driving into people, like it happened at Nice and at Berlin. But no one knew that. So what this spinning this narrative that Muslims don't give a fuck, when they do, because they know that every time this happens, pricks like you, pricks like the people posting those memes, are going to go after them. There's going to be a spike in fucking hate crime against Muslims, even though most Muslims don't do anything like this. Like I said, if they did, I live in a city where about 1 in 5 people is Muslim. If they were all terrorists, they wouldn't be. The other 4 out of the 5 would be dead by now. But it's bollocks. It's total bollocks. It's a tiny minority of scummy arseholes. And when the IRA were doing way worse on a fucking massively regular basis, we did not say, let's stop Catholics coming in. We did not say, oh, you can't build any Catholic churches. We didn't say ban the Irish, or very few anyway, said ban the Irish. There was not a serious push for that. But yeah, getting back to Iraq, there's a thing that, for me, ties up two other elements to this that show a certain hypocrisy and a certain counterproductivity in the way in which the West acts. And that would be that on the very same day that this terrorist outrage happened, there was a bombing by Allied air forces in Iraq, including the bombing of a school. So, way to go there, which killed 230 Iraqis. Now, why is it that 4 white people dead in London get a minute's silence at the United Nations and in the House of Parliament and various other places, but 230 dead Iraqis don't? Why is it that those 4 lives are worth something and those 230 are worth nothing? Because did you hear about those 230 people on news reports? It wasn't given much prominence, was it? Like I say, in places like that, terrorist outrages, the bombing itself was in the 230 weren't killed by terrorist action. Well, depending, I suppose, but non-state terrorist action. But non-state terrorist action happens all the time in places like Iraq, Syria, Pakistan. Do you hear about it in the West? Nope. Do you see any fucking Facebook flag avatars of the, the Afghan flag? And that's partly what gives credence to the terrorist argument, because you show that you don't care about Muslims. When 4 dead people in London are worth endless coverage and 230 dead Iraqis are worth nothing. And the fact that you kill 230 fucking innocent Iraqis anyway. Like, what the fuck? We're bombing this shit out. We've certainly partly our fault that we've bombed this shit out of places like Iraq and Syria for fucking years and years now. Because I know for a fact if bombs are raining down on my city and my family have been fucking murdered, I might turn into a terrorist. Just as much as any of you might fucking turn into terrorists if it happened to you too. Because you've got nothing else to live for, have you? Your life's been destroyed, your house has been destroyed, your family have been fucking killed. You want to seek revenge against those who did it. We don't help ourselves with this shit, and we don't help humanity by fucking murdering hundreds of people and then acting as if nothing happened. What Khalid Massoud did was fucking unforgivable, disgusting, despicable. I'm glad the cunt's dead. He got what he fucking deserved. But what we do isn't actually any better, really, is it? Bombing the shit out of cities. Bombing schools. Fucking hell, man. And that's our government doing it. It's our tax money that's doing this. But do any of these fuckers care? No. Because it doesn't allow them to fucking... when I say these fuckers, these fucking right-wing scumbags, no. Because this doesn't allow them to push their racial narrative. But it's the left doing identity politics. It's incredibly depressing. I don't know what else is to say on that, really. Apart from an interesting aside, a thought that occurred to me. It starts off tangentially, but it does get back to the main point. I watched a video by Steve Shives in the week. Something like the unboxing my anti-Nazi badge or something. Where basically he unboxed, it was like a swastika with a red circle and a red line going through it. It was like a anti-Nazi thing, which he put on his cap. Simple idea, nicely done. I clicked the thumb up on it. That then tweets out I liked video by blah 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 and a link to the thing on Twitter. That was responded to by one Sargon of a cat. So left-wing Sargon. He said, I find it funny that people have to virtue signal that they're against Nazis. Firstly, Sargon, you would never do that because you'd lose a lot of your audience if you ever did. And secondly, you and your ilk ask, following every terrorist incident, to virtue signal, which, I mean, I've explained why virtue signaling is a stupid idea and a fucking farcical concept, whatever. But under your fucking definition, you ask them to virtue signal that they're against terrorism every fucking time. So make up your minds, guys. Is virtue signaling a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I think it's a fucking stupid thing. It's a stupid concept. It's not a fucking argument. It's just thrown out there to try and end a discussion because you're dickheads. It's to make immoral arseholes feel slightly less bad for being immoral arseholes. That's all it is. But whatever, guys. You choose and stick to it. Anyway. I'm sure I've forgotten something that at some point I wanted to make on this. Because like I said, I tried to write... well, no, I never really do scripts for these. I put together like bullet point lists and then sort of ramble upon those and make sure I hit every point to some degree. But like I say, I was just angry with this one. So sorry if this one's been disjointed. Yeah. My thoughts go out to the victims of Masood. Both those obviously that died and those that are injured. Hopefully all of those pull through and make full recoveries. Yeah. Thank you all for listening and watching. Don't let these bastards divide us would be the ultimate message of it. Pip pip.